In trying to understand Watergate, which is a hugely complicated story, there is a chapter that I would like to address today, and that is the Pentagon Papers. I'd like to explain what they are, how they came about, what happened with them. There is a book, see the image. There is a movie that covers this event, and see the image. And all I want to do is say this. The United States is involved in the Vietnam War. And the Vietnam War is this real struggle. We're not winning. We have so much more technology and people and soldiers and weapons, and we're not beating them. So in 1967, the Secretary of the Department of Defense named Robert McNamara said he wanted a study done on our involvement in Vietnam. And he wanted no corners cut. He wanted the whole story, anything and everything. So it started covering our involvement in 1945, a story by itself. It went all the way to 1967-68 when he first commissioned it. It was worked on and came to 46 volumes and 7,000 pages. 7,000 pages is a ton of pages. And it covered anything and everything to do with our involvement in Vietnam. And it was top secret. And Robert McNamara simply wanted to have access to some of that information, but he did not want the public in America to have that information. Unfortunately for him, there was a man named Daniel Ellsberg. He worked at Rand Corporation, and at Rand Corporation, for whatever reason, they had a copy of the Pentagon Papers and all of those volumes, and he decided that America needed to see the information. So he took that information and then went to the New York Times and said in 1971, hey, this is the story of American involvement in Vietnam, but it's not a nice story. It's not a good story. It's not a positive story. And so the New York Times started publishing it. And America went crazy. And there were war protests already in America, but they went crazy with some of the things they learned in this Pentagon paper exposure. And the New York Times did that, but Nixon was president at the time, a whole nother story. And Nixon said, you can't publish that. That's top secret. You know, you're guilty of espionage. Well, then Daniel Ellsberg went to the Washington Post, and the Washington Post started publishing the secret papers of the Pentagon Papers. In all, America will see about 380 pages of the 7,000 pages, but the 380 pages were dynamite. And Nixon was going to go again after the Washington Post. So the Supreme Court stepped in and decided the issue in the summer of 1971 that the power of the freedom of the press was supreme. So the Washington Post was allowed to continue. The New York Times was allowed to continue. And the papers got out, as I said, about 380 pages of the whole 7,000-page document. And it made the protests crazy. It made everybody crazy, especially a president named Richard Nixon, which is another chapter I'll do. But the Pentagon Papers are not only a book you can get, which is only 700 pages long, don't really understand that, or you can watch a movie called The Post with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, in which this event is covered. They do a pretty good job in that movie, I have to say, and the Pentagon Papers are heavy, but boy, is it comprehensive. And Robert McNamara commissioned it, but it was actually completed in January of 1969, ironically the same month that Richard Nixon gave his first inaugural address. And it was the Pentagon Papers that made Richard Nixon so paranoid that he wanted to wipe out all the leaks that could ever happen out of Washington, D.C. and in the White House. And it led directly to the Watergate break-in that caused the Watergate cover-up and all the crazy things that happened with that. Thanks for joining me. You'll see more chapters to follow.